Well, thank you for joining us for another episode of Marking the Times. There's a lot of things happening in our world today, really related to end time prophecy. So keep sending in your questions, and I'll keep providing these updates. And again, if you know some folks who'd be interested in this who aren't watching, be sure and tell them about it. We talked last week about the coronavirus and what the Bible says about plagues. And certainly that's very up to date to what's happening. One other thing I just want to mention quickly before I get to the main topic for today. The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists was started back in 1947. They started what's called the Doomsday Clock, and they'd move the hands closer or further from midnight, depending kind of on what's happening in the world and how close they thought we were to kind of nuclear apocalypse. Well, just here a few days ago, they moved the hands closer than they've ever been. It was 2.5 minutes before midnight. They moved it to 100 seconds. And it's the first time it's ever been gauged in time in terms of seconds rather than minutes or hours. So I just thought that's kind of interesting. The doomsday clock now is closer to midnight than it's ever been with all the things happening in our world today. Another thing that I know has been on many of y'all's minds is kind of the Middle East peace plan that's been given by President Trump. The other day it was unveiled with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, next to President Trump. It's a 181-page document that's been worked on for a long period of time. It's been called, President Trump calls it the deal of the century. But it's a Middle East peace plan. And of course, it was rejected out of hand by the Palestinians and by almost all of the other Arab and Muslim nations. But when you think about President Trump and what he's done a lot of positive things for Israel. He moved the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of the nation of Israel. He's recognized the Golan Heights as part of Israel, other areas of settlements as part of Israel. So he's really done a lot for the nation of Israel, and he's trying to hammer out and forge a peace deal between Israel and, of course, the Palestinians, something that really every president since 1948 has tried to bring about some kind of resolution or Middle East peace plan. Jimmy Carter worked on it a lot. Of course, a lot of you remember with President Clinton when he had Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat there on the White House lawn shaking hands. It's been something that president after president, secretary of state after secretary of state have tried to bring to pass. And this was unveiled here. And of course, again, it came to a lot of mixed reviews. But one thing that obviously Iran, who's a great opponent of Israel, their comment was simply that this Middle East peace deal will die before President Trump does. That was kind of the only statement they had about it. But really what I want to mention about it, I don't want to get into the details. You can read about it online, about the Middle East peace plan and really what all it entails. But I think it's very prophetically significant because when you think about the end times and the coming tribulation period, the Bible tells us that the event that starts the 7-year tribulation period, that really starts the final clock ticking, is a peace treaty or a peace compact or a peace covenant between the coming Antichrist and the nation of Israel. Now, I don't want to imply in any way that President Trump is the Antichrist. None of the other previous presidents who worked on a Middle East peace deal were the Antichrist either. But what we see this as a foreshadow and a highlighting of the fact that this is a major issue in the world. It has been for decades. It still is today. There's a yearning for peace over there in the Middle East to solve the problem between Israel and the Palestinian and Israel and her neighbors. And what President Trump has done is just really another phase or another step in that. And I don't think this will be accepted, but it just again highlights the idea that that's a problem in the world everybody wants solved. And someday it will be when the Antichrist comes on the scene. And we know that because in Daniel 9 and verse 27, it says, "And he," it's speaking there of the Antichrist, that the coming world ruler, "will make a firm covenant with the many," talking about the many in Israel in the context, "for 1 week. 1 week of years, which is 7 years." And you go on and read in the context, it seems that this treaty will give Israel the right to their Temple Mount, the right to offer sacrifices there in a rebuilt third temple. So most Bible scholars, and me included, believe this is some kind of a peace treaty. We also know from Ezekiel 38, a passage we've talked about a lot here recently in light of the rise of Iran, says there in Ezekiel 38 that when Israel's invaded by an Iranian-Russian alliance in the end times, they're going to be at rest. They're going to be living securely. And so that, again, is another hint that there's going to be some kind of peace agreement between Israel and her neighbors in the future. And so what we see happening really in Israel today with President Trump and this peace agreement is just another foreshadow. It's another buildup, if you will, to what the Bible predicts is coming. Now, in Daniel 9:27, when it says the Antichrist will make a firm covenant with the many in Israel, that could mean to strengthen a covenant. In other words, it could mean strengthening or enforcing a covenant that already exists. Or some take it, he will compel a covenant. In other words, he's going to bring these parties together and force them to forge a treaty together with one another. Again, we don't know exactly how this will look when it takes place, but this compact, this covenant, this treaty will come to pass someday. And that's what's going to begin the 7-year tribulation period. And what we see today happening over there, again, with President Trump, like many presidents before him, is just a further foreshadowing and more building blocks for what the Bible predicts will ultimately happen in the end times. And so when the Antichrist comes on the scene, he's going to come on the scene on a platform of peace. I mean, he's going to look like the man with a plan. And he'll probably win the Time Man of the Year. He'll probably win the Nobel Peace Prize. Of course, eventually the mask will come off. He'll be unveiled for what he really is. But what we see happening there today, I think, is prophetically significant. And we'll keep our eyes on that here in the days ahead. Well, thank you for joining us again. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.